Hi, this is Harvey at Figaholics. Today we're going to have a discussion on the grafting of figs, some general discussion on why I graft, some considerations on what type of grafts I'm going to use, and follow-up maintenance of the graft after it's been made. Figs typically have not been grafted by commercial growers. In some cases, commercial growers have used grafting, however, to top work an orchard to switch varieties, but generally figs are grown from rooted cuttings growing on their own roots. About 3 years ago, I decided to try my first graft of figs. I wanted to grow a variety, Black Madeira, that's quite popular, but it's also known for being slow growing. Some people have called it a dwarf variety. I'd grown it before. My tree had grown slowly and died. And so I ended up wanting to try to grow it onto a vigorous variety to see if that would help. I didn't have any extra rootstock at the time. I went to a big box store and bought a tree of brown turkey. I just selected it because it was a good vigorous looking tree, and that graft took and the tree grew well. At the same time, I got a Black Madeira cutting rooted, started that. That tree grew pretty well, but somewhat typical for Black Madeira. It was somewhat slow. I ended up planting both of those trees the following year in the ground in my orchard. And at the end of 3 growing seasons, at the end of 2015, the grafted Black Madeira was about 10 times the size of the non-grafted Black Madeira. Not in height, but in total volume. Width and height and number of branches and so forth. And just based on the number of cuttings I could take from that tree at the end of the season. And for instance, my grafted tree maybe had some branches growing 7 feet long during the growing season, whereas the non-grafted tree, 3.5, 4 feet at the most. Let's take a look at a picture. On the left-hand side is my grafted Black Madeira, and on the right is the non-grafted Black Madeira, both at the end of 3 growing years. As you can see, that tree is quite a bit larger, and it's produced more fruit for me, as well as being a larger tree. There's some other reasons why I've started grafting too. Like many times I've seen a variety like many other people, and I wanted to try it. It looked good, heard good reports from others. I got cuttings, but maybe need to wait 2 years or more to get fruit. I decided to graft some of those onto vigorous rootstock again in hopes to maybe get fruit at the end of the first year. And sometimes that's worked out well for me. Another reason, sometimes I've paid a lot of money for a cutting that is new and very popular, high demand, and to get my best chances out of that very valuable cutting, I might cut it into 3 or 4 pieces and graft 3 or 4 pieces out of it, or I might just use 1 piece and graft that and root the rest, a variety of combinations. Give myself more odds to get successful propagation of that variety, rather than just try rooting 1 cutting, 1 shot at it, and that's it. Sometimes also I've gotten some very small cuttings that I didn't feel comfortable with rooting. A couple months ago I got 8 Jolly Tiger cuttings, and the largest of those was about pencil size in diameter and about 2 inches long. I guess that's able to be rooted. That's smaller than what I usually work with. The smallest of those cuttings was less than 1/8 inch in diameter, and I wasn't very confident in being able to get that rooted, and I decided to graft all of those. There were 8 cuttings. Some of those skinny ones were longer, 3 or 4 inches. I cut those in half and made 12 grafts. That was about 3 weeks ago I made those grafts, and most of those are growing now. Some are just getting started. I use different types of grafts on them. Some types of grafts grow faster, but I hope by the end of this summer to have 8 to 10 good-sized Jolly Tiger trees, whereas if I tried rooting them, I wasn't too sure I would get more than maybe a couple of them if I was lucky. So let's take a look at the progress of those after about 3 weeks. I've always grafted dormant scions onto actively growing fig trees And here's an example of a tree I can use for a rootstock. This is a tree I acquired from a friend. We exchanged different things. He obtained this from someone that claimed it was a variegated fig. It wasn't. So rather than me throwing it away, I use it for rootstock. This has 2 branches on it. I can graft both branches, just graft one, whatever I want to do. I can graft 1 variety, 2 varieties, and so forth. There's different types of grafts I use, and here as an example is a sign that I might use for grafting. And if I was to use this sign here, I would most likely graft onto this branch here, about the same diameter, and I would use a whip and tongue graft. A whip and tongue graft, I like the signs to be the same diameter as the rootstock branch, but I can go by, get by with a little bit smaller, maybe down to 80%. I would just cut this rootstock branch less than halfway through to where the diameter was, or the width was the same as the cambium layer on the scion. Now here's another branch I've got, and here I can do a couple different things with this branch. I could use a whip and tongue on this branch over here, and at the same time I could use a piece of it to do a cleft graft onto this branch. A cleft graft I like to be anywhere from say 25% to 80% of the diameter of the rootstock branch. It starts getting even 80%, I end up having more problems with splitting of the rootstock branch. So I might end up actually trimming away the inside of the split some on that. I have demonstrations, videos on the different types of grafts. I'm just showing you how I choose the type of graft right now. Now, another type of graft I've been using this year, I haven't done prior to this year, is a modified rind bark graft. With a modified rind bark graft, besides the tree being actively growing, the bark needs to be able to be slipping, where the bark can be easily lifted up from the wood of the branch. Because again, I have a video demonstrating this type of grafting process, and it gets slid underneath the bark. You can watch that video. With this type of graft, I like the scion to be anywhere from 10% to 30%, 33% of the diameter of the branch I'm going to be grafting onto. If the branch is somewhat oval in shape, I would end up grafting more on the flat side. But again, that gives me an idea on it. Actually, I could use this portion here, as a whip and tongue if I wanted. But this here is a good sign, and I could maybe even do a cleft graft on a portion of that branch with this, and a modified rind bark graft on that. But that's some of the things that go into my mind when I'm choosing the type of graft I'm going to do. Now, after the graft is done, it's rubber band put on place, parafilm put in place. I'll continue to knock off suckers off the rootstock. I want all the energy going into my grafts. Need to water it some, not a lot, because they're not using much water at this point until there's some more growth. The other thing that happens is you start getting some vigorous growth. You should put a stake in and support those branches, because the wind can whip that branch around, and this is quite firm, rigid here, older wood, and that new tender growth, you can just imagine it's going to be whipping like this, and you can break your union pretty easily. It takes several months for that union to become real strong and support it. So go ahead and put a stake in place and support it. And let it grow. You don't need to do any pinching. You want it to grow as much energy into that as you can, and just let it grow away, and maybe you'll get fruit the first year. I'd like you to subscribe to my channel. I have more videos planned. I have a drone on the way. I hope to do some fun videos with that, give you a tour of my farm. I have over 300 varieties of figs on my farm. And this summer I hope to do lots of videos showing you tasting of all the varieties of figs I have. So please subscribe, and thanks again for watching.